Good evening. Thank you very much for coming out this evening, making the journey here. Those of us joining us on the World Wide Web and who will later watch this on video. Tonight's presentation, Citizen Engagement, engaging for citizen lobbyists. And just to give you a general overview, I'm Steve Klein. I'm a staff attorney here at Wyoming Liberty Group, and coming up in February will be my fourth Wyoming legislative session, budget session, to be a lobbyist. I'm proudly wearing my lobbyist name tag here for 2013 to 14, so I guess I'm covered for a little while, which is good. And we're joined this evening, outstandingly, by Representative Lynn Hutchings and Representative John Eklund, both of Cheyenne, Wyoming. Lynn represents House District 42, which is Laramie County, and John represents House District 10, which covers parts of Laramie and Goshen counties. And so we will hear from them, and I'm going to open basically with a few minutes presentation. We'll hear a few minutes of presentation from each of them, and then we can open it up for your questions. I might have a few questions myself, actually. So I do want to start by getting the legal jargon out of the way, and I do also. It's very interesting when we hear the term lobbyist. It's become fairly pejorative. It's something we say as a derogatory comment, and indeed that kind of is. You think lobbyist, you think somebody who's out there going to legislature not to just to get their opinions out there, but to buy influence, to take people out to expensive dinners, to maybe slip them a few dollars. I don't know. It's become a very, especially in D.C., a particularly bad thing. If you're a lobbyist, ooh, it's like you might as well be a spider. I don't know. But it goes much broader than that, and we have to look, first of all, getting the legal jargon out of the way. Lobbying under Wyoming law is an attempt to influence legislation. That's it. Now, that's very, very broad. Years and years ago, decades ago, under federal law, lobbying went up to the United States Supreme Court, and they narrowed that definition. They said the only way that this is possibly constitutional is if we interpret it as direct engagement with legislators. Nevertheless, that still covers a whole lot of ground. Under Wyoming law, if you're going to lobby, at least as far as the law goes, the registration requirements begin at actually a $0 threshold. If you're technically going to lobby, you have to pay a $5 fee, get yourself one of these handy-dandy name tags, and have yourself in the files. If you're going to if you get paid to lobby more than $500, then you have to pay a $25 fee to register. Now, the reporting requirement, when you have to submit all those forms for the dinners you might be paying for and things like that, that begins at $500 as well. So there's a $0 threshold, technically. The reality is, as citizens, you are not required to register as lobbyists. You may show up to legislature, attend committee meetings, testify at committee meetings, and not have to wear this name tag. It gets very dicey when you are part of an organization, be it a nonprofit like Wyoming Liberty Group, be it a unincorporated group of people, be it, and most you will see groups, Wyoming Gun Owners, Y-Watch, Equality State Policy Center, all of these groups do register and do attend to testify before meetings. So the reality is that the law itself is all-encompassing. Thankfully, unlike a lot of states, we don't have a particularly onerous regime here just waiting to crack down on people. So if you just want to show up and make your opinion heard, you are not required really to do anything but show up. But going beyond that, beyond the law is really what we're here to talk about this evening, because there's to be effective, I think, requires a few things, and I'm really happy again to have two legislators here who can tell us from their own experience what works and what does not work. But coming from my experience, and we do have some handouts, and then first mistake of the evening was not to hand out the handouts. That was a fine maneuver. Maureen Bader, ladies and gentlemen. And a lot of these points will be on this outline. I'm going to add to what I think is important here. I think the 3 Ps are very good. Be polite, be presentable, and be professional about your engagements with the legislature. Politeness is simply the golden rule. Treat others as you wish to be treated. I think somehow, and all too unfortunately, legislators get treated as if they are employees, and people like to use that term, oh, you work for me. And I only bring that up because I have to say the people who act like, who make that statement, all too often I have to wonder where you've been working. I mean, it must be a pretty hostile work environment when people bring that up and act like they can basically show up and say, oh, you work for me, therefore you will listen. So anyway, overall in legislature, in my experience, it is very polite, it is very cordial. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that that's unfortunately something that's been, especially in the last few recent years, over controversial bills, that tends to go out the window. And that's something I think that needs to change. And at the very least, you will find yourself being, as well received as you would be if somebody came up and started yelling at you and calling you a sellout, et cetera, et cetera. Presentable, again, Wyoming has a pretty relaxed environment, especially for citizen lobbying. I don't really need to go into too many details about that, but maybe anything above a leisure suit, generally, you're probably in a good position. That said, I think in anything in life, the more presentable you are, the more seriously people are going to take you. I think a tie goes a long way. Suit even more so. Professional, now that's where things get, I think, especially important, because the objective, this is how you can change the entire tone of lobbyist. Are you there representing a special interest, or are you there to become a trusted resource? That is what I try and do. I will gladly wear this badge, but I want my reputation at the legislature to be a trusted resource. I'm not just there to give my message, and I have plenty of them to give, but when I show up there, I also want to be someone who legislators can email about other questions. Do they want an alternative opinion to what they've been hearing? Not just from fellow legislators, but from the Legislative Services Office, from the Attorney General's office. And oftentimes, not always, but I might have, if not a contrary opinion, at least something additional to contribute. And, I do this full time. I understand I get to do this as a job, and it's wonderful. But if you have even one topic that you want, be it firearms, be it land rights, be it taxation, to know that topic as best you can, inside and out, is absolutely invaluable. Because, as these guys will tell you, in a legislative session, a full session, 40 days, last year, more than 400 bills. This budget session, I expect it to be, how many are going to survive introduction? Who knows? Even if it's 100, it's going to be, in 20 days, a lot more than they can necessarily handle. And that's human nature when you see how much text that is and putting it all into context. So if you know inside and out and can answer all of the questions that they have, you will automatically put yourself far above the average lobbyist. And this is where I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to name subjects. For me, a few years ago, testified against expanding the subsidy for the ethanol industry in Wyoming. We have one ethanol factory up in Torrington, and ethanol is a 20-year plus boondoggle at this point, that basically we are subsidizing very inefficient fuel that is not actually environmentally friendly. But it does account for about 20 jobs or so up in Torrington. And it was basically me versus the industry lobbyist. And after giving this long, a very good presentation and answering all the questions that the panel had in committee, I was able to, the only retort that I actually heard was, a guy stands up and says, yeah, well, we're exporting it now, and then sits down. It was like, wow, you just own the room on that one, fella. That's a terrible example, because at the end of the day, that subsidy did continue. But nevertheless, that was a juxtapose, like, you are getting paid to represent these guys, and you have no arguments at your fingertips. So that's I think, the biggest thing that you can possibly do to be an effective lobbyist. And also, and you'll see that on your handouts, when you don't know, don't change the subject. Don't try and deflect. Say, I don't know, can I get back to you on that? Or simply, I don't know, I hadn't thought of that. Honesty goes a really long way. And politics, like lawyering, does involve a fair amount of balderdash. And I hate to admit that, but if you don't like it, wait until amateurs try it. And that's where you really go wrong. That's where I've seen it all too many times. Because more often than not, when I'm up there, I'm trying to be direct. I'm trying to present facts. And if I don't know, I will say I don't know, and I'll follow up by email, follow up by any way I can if I do discover an answer to their questions. So moving on, kind of talking, and direct lobbying, I'm going to leave to Lynn and John here. But as far as you guys going in, because a lot of the magic happens at legislature in committee. When they hear things on the floor of either house, you guys have no input other than to call legislators out into the lobby and speak with them directly. But by then, a lot of floor debate is going on. It's far better to get to them far earlier than that. But during committee, that is when you have a chance as citizens, be it with a group or be it individually, to show up and testify. And so a few tips there. Absolutely arrive early. Why? Because these rooms in the legislature are really small, especially if it's not a really contentious bill like the Healthcare Freedom Amendment, where they put us in the Hirschler basement and there's tons of room for everybody. But if it's a bill that's really important to you and maybe a dozen other people, trust me, you want to get there early because you need to get a seat. I think testimony is often very short. I think it's better that way. Honestly, I have this foolproof framework that I've put on this handout. Honestly, my name is Steve Klein, and I live in Cheyenne. I support this bill because reason number one, reason number two, reason number three. Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify. I'm happy to take questions. That conciseness, and again, having great reasons, goes so far because you are not wasting their time. They will thank you for that. Also, do not repeat others' testimony. I can't emphasize that enough. I agree with this person. I'm here to represent that, that as well, that interest. A lot, again, if it's a contentious bill, you might be one of 60 or 70 people in that room testifying. So brevity becomes far more important. But if you are only one of 5 people testifying, but you're one of the people who showed up to say that exact same thing, again, you have had a very strong influence on that panel. And the thing I want to emphasize before turning it over to Lynn and John is it's really cool that modern social media is now giving us an opportunity to be more than one place at once in a certain sense. And because during legislature, you might have, and especially last session, I had this happen at least 3-4 times, where one bill was being heard in one committee, another bill I was interested in was being heard in another committee. I could not be 2 places at once. It's just physically impossible. But now with Twitter especially, which apologies for the people who don't know what that is, but it's basically a social media website where you can send out to the world 140 characters at a time posts. And you can use tags, and the tag we use is WYLEG, YLEG, for anything that's going on in the Wyoming legislature. And you use that tag on your posts, and then you can follow all the other tags. And as a result, I'm pretty sure every reporter in Wyoming who attends the legislature is now tweeting. They're now sending out stuff as it happens. That can also include pictures. That can include, suddenly there's a handout. Someone might take a picture of it with their smartphone and post it online. And you can follow what's going on around the legislature, even if you're in one room waiting for testimony. It's especially cool because we only have that half a dozen reporters or so covering legislature. Suddenly you become a citizen journalist. Suddenly you're letting people know what's going on. And reporters might pick up on what you're doing. And I think that's really a cool influence. And then there's people who forget being in another room. There are a lot of people, a lot of your fellow citizens and yourselves can't make it to legislature every day. But using the Twitter website and that YLEG tag, you can keep tabs on what's going on and know what to contact your legislator for or know what you need to follow up on. So it really is cool, and I really commend the Wyoming the Legislative Services Office and the staff at the legislature because they do a great job keeping the website up to date on a daily basis. But with Twitter and these other social media outlets, now there's like a live feed going on. And it's a really cool thing that really came to fruition last year, and I hope that continues. So, other things to do while you're waiting, stop by Y Liberty. We are always here. I do want to say, when it comes to being professional and brushing up on bills, I'm not just a research source for these guys. I'm a resource for all of you. I can't necessarily give you days of work, but we can happily sit down for a half hour if you have a question about a bill, and I can try and put it into context for you. Otherwise, I will now turn it over to Lynn Hutchings.
Thank you, Steve. Some speech. I'm Lynn Hutchings, representative of House District 42, for those of you who came in after he had introduced us. I don't want to go over what Steve went over, but he did a really good job. I lobbied for 2 sessions, I think, before I became a legislator, and I've got to say the Wyoming Liberty Group was a great resource for me when I was lobbying, and I really appreciate that. There are a couple things I'd like to go over, and there are these little booklets down at the Capitol, and the booklets have the pictures of every legislator, who they are, what party they are, and all that. One of the things I did as a lobbyist is I went through that booklet and kind of got an idea of who would agree with what I was trying to lobby, my issue. And I would mark them with a special color, who was going to be the next hardest person to deal with, and so on and so forth, and who was just an absolute no. So I didn't waste a lot of time going to the people who already agreed with me. I went directly to those people who maybe were on the fence or just, like I say, were going to be an absolute no. So I worked hard on those. And one thing I will reiterate that Steve said is being kind really matters. When you're talking to people, and I've seen this with other lobbyists, and they even got me aside. Lynn, you're too kind. You've got to go at them. You got to, and I find, maybe that works for them, but it didn't work for me. I liked being nice to the legislators, and I think that helped me get in because I wasn't unkind to them in the lobbying process. When you're going down there, a lot of times people will come out and they'll have, like, here's a booklet to read. I want you to vote on this particular issue. You don't want to do that. You want to have 1, maybe 2 pages at the most with bullet statements on what you want them to know. Give them your email, give them your phone number, and hey, call me if you have any questions, but you don't want to give us something this thick to read on your issue because we pretty much won't have time to look at it, just to be honest with you. And being aggressive, you got to kind of be sneaky, and you got to kind of know how the Capitol is laid out when you're lobbying one-on-one. You got to know that there's a stairway that they can go up and go down and go behind you, and you won't see them. You're sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting for them to come out to talk to you when they're in their cars. They're going home. They've found the way to get out and around you. So you got to be careful of that, or just keep your eye on them. And if you see them being evasive, then you might as well give up. One thing that Steve didn't mention is when you write a note to the legislator up in the lobby. There are a list of the names, and there are these little notes that you can write a note to your legislator, tell them who you are, where you're from, what your subject is. Hey, call me, come out to the lobby and talk to me, something like that. If you give them that note and you tell them to come out to meet you in the lobby, you got to be there. You can't send in the note and then take off, because if they have to come out to find you, your credibility is shot down 1 level, pretty much, because you didn't wait. I've waited for over an hour for someone to come out. And sometimes they went that back way and got out, and I missed them. Sometimes they came past me like this, and I caught them. So you got to be quick, and you got to be a little aggressive, but in a kind way. Another thing about lobbying that wasn't mentioned is you got to be prepared for them just to say, no, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to listen to you. That's just the facts of life. Our legislators sometimes just don't want to talk to you. They don't want to listen. Some of them are afraid. I've had one say, hey, I'm a rancher. I don't know anything about that issue. And he didn't want to know. So he was one of those. I'm not going to be able to get through to him. There was one I wrote a note to. He was a little timid about talking to me. And he says, this issue that you're working on, I'm just so sick of hearing about it. And for me, it's like, well, this is what my job is. My job is to help you understand about this issue as best I can. And I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. Know your subject. Know it, know it, know it. So when you're talking to them, you can maybe say something that will open up their eyes on your subject. But I wrote him a little note, this legislator, that didn't really want to talk to me. And a Charlie Daniels song or some country and western singer song came to mind, and you'll know it when I say it. I said, sometimes you have to know when to hold them, sometimes you have to know when to fold them, and sometimes you have to know when to just walk away. And if you want to talk to me, you can come talk to me. This guy came up into the galley upstairs in the house with tears in his eyes. He was bawling. And then I start crying. Why is he crying? He's just, thank you for understanding that I just pretty much had enough. And I can't remember if he voted my way or not, but again, just knowing when to say that I'm done with you, move on to the next one. That's about it for right now, until you have more questions for us. Thank you.
Is this on? You can hear me? Okay.
It's just for the video.
Oh, okay. I'm John Eklund. I'm a representative for Eastern Laramie County and a portion of Goshen County as well. And most of what Lynn covered, I guess I would agree with. Lobbyists that are threatening or demanding get nowhere, and get nowhere with the entire House. They've killed good bills, bills that I supported and would have probably gotten passed if they had been kinder or more effective in the way they presented their idea. Because with 400 bills, if you pick one of them out and you're going to be mad at somebody over it, you're wasting your time. We're not going to please everybody all of the time. That's the way it goes with lobbyists. They need to know. Move on to the next bill. Move on to the next step. When Lynn and I went, I'm guessing your training was the same as mine. When we went through training, the lobbyists were considered part of the group of people who would help educate us, because there's just a broad range of things that we need to know. I farm and ranch, so agriculture I understand really well, and I can be pretty effective in that field. But you get to health care and, that one's a tough one. And education's a hard one. You get to just different issues. We rely on training from all sides, and constituents are lobbyists as well, and important to us. And any help that you can offer, because a lot of times the bill isn't. We're not real clear on what the unintended consequences could be, and I think constituents can come forward with better than lobbyists, than registered lobbyists, and help us out with little details that may help us in floor debate, coming up with ideas so that the legislature can come up with a final settled decision. I've enjoyed the job. I've enjoyed the work. Most of the lobbyists in Wyoming are pretty good. Very civil, I think. There's the few exceptions got nowhere, like I said. But I guess one of the main problems I've found with the jobs is a lot of times you're faced with two really crummy decisions. If you leave it the way it is, it's not working, and if you change it, you might make it worse. So a lot of times it's just trying to decide between two really crummy outcomes, and I could share a few of those stories, but a lot of times we're able to do some things that are really effective and useful to the people of Wyoming. I didn't come here prepared with anything. I agree with the concise presentation. Be brief, if at all possible, and anything that's handed out to the legislatures, if you can't get it on one side of a piece of paper, and I'm large print too, we probably aren't going to get it read. There's just so much reading. The bills are difficult. It isn't like sitting down to a good novel or a magazine article. It's statute law, and it's just really dry and hard to follow a lot of times. So somebody coming with a piece of paper making the bill interesting, or the pros or cons of the bill more interesting than the statute law reads, is usually pretty helpful, and I think pretty effective. My decision's been changed by a simple handout from lobbyists. I'm trying to think what other. I can't think of much else other than ask us some questions.
Grab this one. Are we good, Chad? On this one too. Yeah, I did want to follow up because I just wanted to kind of emphasize John's point about why bills, in particular proposed bills, can be so confusing, especially if it's amending current legislation and it's a giant, let's say it's a giant statute that runs 4 pages. The only parts that are going to end up in a bill are the parts getting amended. So if you're looking at a bill off the LSO website or even a hard copy of a proposed bill, you don't have the entire law in front of you. It can be very difficult to put that into context. And that's something I think I run into most when people email me questions, legislators and citizens alike. And so I really encourage you, because we pay a lot of money for a great Westlaw subscription here at Liberty, and I can print you out every law in the United States if I wanted to. So Wyoming definitely can get you the full law, the most up-to-date version of it, and we're happy to help you out with that and sit down and even cases that relate to that law if we need to go that deep. So I did want to follow up on Lynn's question first. You mentioned the waiting a whole hour to come out. And my rule of thumb, having experienced this, is 2.5 hours when I finally realize, no, I don't think I'll be seeing Senator so-and-so today. Do you think, is that fair? Does there come a point where you can just take a hint, or should you wait till they're done for the day?
For me, I was a novice lobbyist, like so many of you would probably be, and can you go send somebody in to look to see, are they still there? Oh, no, he left an hour ago. Yeah, so you just have to play it by ear. But for me, I will always come out, so you won't ever have to go hunting for me.
I may send a message out that I can't come. I won't always come out. When we're debating general file bills, that usually is the best time, I understand, but it's also my best time for an education. So when we're debating during that first reading and we're going through it, I hate to leave because I'll miss some important information, especially if it's one of those bills I have no clue of, but I usually try to at least send a message out or tell them I'll talk to them another time. And I don't know when the best time is, because my committee meetings start at 7 in the morning, and we run late a lot of times. A good time might be at receptions and things.
I had a follow-up, and then I just lost it. It's completely gone. And we mentioned, as far as, I did want to point out committee meetings, and this is an interesting thing to point out, is that, we have a United States Constitution, and I get to do a lot of work in the First Amendment, the right to free speech. Having said that, understand that, and there are First Amendment, if you want to protest outside or just have a big sign in front of the Capitol, you are more than welcome to do that. If you want to speak out, write op-eds, all of these things remain wonderfully, largely uninhibited. When you want to get together and during election time, that's a different story, but that's a different panel. Now, I did want, because as John mentioned, as far as committee meetings, especially morning and especially at noon when they get together, they have a very limited time frame. And if they want to get those bills out, that's when it becomes especially time sensitive, that if you are brief, it really helps to move things along. But it's also something you have to remember is you don't have a right to testify in committee. You don't. It's not there. They can. I've never seen this happen, but they could even limit it to certain interest groups with no First Amendment, according to Supreme Court precedent, with no First Amendment problems to you. Again, I've never seen that happen, but understand you are, when it comes to our Republican small r form of government, you have elected these representatives, and they get to run this House, this show, as they see fit. So that's an important thing to remember, that you are a guest when you're coming to testify to a certain extent. And that's, I think, it becomes, I've had this happen before where I had to get up and give a 30-second testimony. And it was really good 30 seconds, but they had to get back into the House. So I think that's something to keep in mind.
You really hit on something, Steve, and I think I can kind of remember you testifying in one of my committees. He was telling the truth. He got up and he said who he was, what he was about, and then he sat down after he said it and just seems like less than 2 or 3 minutes. And then you have the guys that just go on, and you lose us. You lose us. I'm gone. I think after the first few minutes, you've lost me. And like you said, someone will get up and say the exact same thing you said for another 30 minutes. And you try to be kind and let them speak, but brevity is so important. And just to think back that I can remember you doing what you did, and then some of these guys, not you in particular, but others that have stood up for a very long time, I don't have a clue what they said. So that's important. Thank you.
I would add that we're trying to work the bill at the same time that the committee meeting's going on, and a frustration that I have is that lobbyists use up the entire time that we have during that committee meeting, and we can't really hammer out details. And then it goes to the floor. I've watched disasters. It goes to the floor and it isn't ready. And you know it needs amendments. You didn't get it done in committee, and it goes to the floor, and by then there's a blitz of emails because it wasn't amended the way you wanted the bill to be, and it gets slaughtered on the House floor. So we really need time to work the bill as well. So brevity by the lobbyists is a really, it's so important. Yep.
And I'd follow up because in my experience, in the interim is a great time to get together when you can have these larger discussions. If you just love guns, which this is Wyoming, who doesn't, really? And you just want to sit down and talk larger issues, be it national policy, be it anything going on that you maybe see coming down the pipeline but isn't necessarily here yet. I would imagine that interim is the time to have a conversation like that. Am I right about that? And I guess a follow-up question would be, do you have a lot of constituents who do actually contact you in the interim, or is it mostly people coming out of the woodwork during session?
I'm looking at thinking about my email and how it fills up. I think you can say both
periods. But the interim, like you said, is important, where we travel all over the state. We get a chance to be in Jackson, Riverton, Casper, Guernsey, wherever, and then you can come wherever you live, and you can come and sit with us. And it is kind of neat to be able to speak to someone for 30, 40 minutes in a relaxed atmosphere in the summertime in the interim committees about an issue that we're going to speak about during this session. So I think it is a little bit better in the interim to be able to speak to the lobbyists during that time.
Yeah, you probably have more time, but it's usually more of a blitz during the session, I would say. I was going to mention there are differences in legislators and how you can contact them and work with them. Sounds like Lynn does a lot with emails, and I'm just the electric, all this electron. I don't know what you're talking about with Twitter. I'm sorry, but some of us haven't really picked up on that yet, and I'm working on it. But when you're running a business, you're trying to read bills and you're trying to get other things done. I don't know how. For me, it's easier to pick up the phone and talk to somebody than just to type out what I want to say to them. So, but there are those differences between legislators that you're wanting to lobby, and I would be one that's kind of old-fashioned.
Well, I brought up email, not to say that I really like email. I like people to call me. I like them to call my home and say, hey, Lynn, I want to talk to you about an issue. And if they have information they want to give me, email it to me, and I will give you either my personal address or I'll go to the legislative address. But let me tell you, even in the summertime, we get thousands of emails, and they don't come just from Cheyenne, from Wyoming. They're from Wisconsin, California, Colorado. And the thing is, sometimes you don't really realize where they're coming from until you read it. And it's like, Wisconsin, what are you doing writing me? So call us first if you can, or leave a message at our home saying, hey, I'm going to send you an email, this is my name, and then go that route. So we're looking for it, and not just, it doesn't get mixed in with the thousands of emails that we get.
One legislator, to his credit, has finally set up an auto reply on his email stating, I do not answer emails, you may call me at this number. So I think now is the time to turn it over to you guys. If you guys have any questions, this is a Q&A with an emphasis on the Q, not a time for your speeches or anything like that. You will have, you can certainly meet with our legislators afterward. We'll have some time to mingle afterward, but I've authorized Maureen to use deadly force if you have not taken this brevity lesson to heart. So.
Who has that?
I'll try, Steve. I'll really try. We have Charles Curley reading all the bills that he can get his hands on now. He's all the bills that are before committee and making comments on them. And for a while, I've wondered how helpful that will be to legislators if we should be. He has 3 categories: oppose, support, or neutral. And a brief description of what he has decided the bill says. Would that kind of thing prior to the session be helpful to you?
For me personally, just knowing that someone's gone through the bill and, like you say, there's a summary to give you a quick idea what it's about, I would love to have that resource.
Yeah, I weigh in on what different groups have found in their own study. Eventually, I think for every legislator, it ends up, I just don't have any. I thought I would have some set rules, no taxes, no this, or yes to this, or no, but you oftentimes just have to listen to what's there and what your alternatives are. But yeah, the Liberty Group information has been helpful. I've passed with flying colors a couple times, depending on which bills they picked to grade me on, and really bombed other times. But but it is important to know that other people are studying what's going on. There's more than just 60 minds wrapped around it.
Right. Just really quickly on that, I told people when I knocked on their doors, I'm retired military, I have limited knowledge, I'm going to depend on you to help me be a better legislator, so any resource I can get, I'm going to love it.
I represent, I guess is the word. I'm a legislative information person in our church group. It's a fairly large group of women, the Cathedral Guild. And I'm new at this, although I've been a citizen lobbyist for a couple of years. But these women will not be, for the most part, there are a few who go to committee meetings, but for the most part, I want to set up a method to inform them of legislation that's pertinent to us and help them to contact the legislators. About half of them, about 88 of them have email, and about 80 of them do not, so they would be telephone. So I'm glad to hear that telephone is okay. I thought they would probably be.
For me.
But my question is there a guideline for something like that, how people can contact? For instance, there's email, there's that short little email thing, I don't know how many, like 1 or 2 sentences. Do you look at those? Do you, what's best?
One of the things what I told people when they email me is, number one, put the bill number or actually not even the number, put the title of the bill in the subject block, and then put whether you want me to vote yes or no. That kind of helps me put them in categories. I have a young intern. Put it in categories. So when I get to that bill, I can kind of decide, okay, if I haven't already made up my mind, okay, these people are saying this, and these people are saying this. But if you put what you want, how you want me to vote in the subject block, and then additional information inside the email, I think that helps a little bit better than having me open up the mail, having to read it, and find out at the very last line, and please vote yes. No, because sometimes those emails are super, super long. But do that with the subject blocks. If I've answered your question, I'm not certain.
Yes, but I'm full of questions. I have another one if I can go ahead.
Did you want to say anything on that?
If it's something really urgent, we get hundreds of emails and you don't know what to respond to. Computer-generated emails, those don't work, where you'll have hundreds of them sent. They say exactly the same thing. Somebody has a list of people's emails and they just send them out. That's a waste of time. And I really don't tally up scores on emails. I depend on a lot more resources than that myself. And so if it's something of urgency and you need to get a hold of legislators, you probably have to be more persistent, would be my guess.
Would it be best for us to confine ourselves to Laramie County? Do you listen or read and pay attention to those that are more local?
For me, I try to pay attention to those in my district first. Well, you know, that's important, putting what district you're in. Like I say, if I get something from Cody, you know, yeah, I'll listen to him because we make decisions for the whole state. But if I get something from Wisconsin, that's in the trash. But from you, someone in my district, yeah, I'm going to pay a lot of attention to you. So that's important too. I'm in your house district, blah, 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 blah. And put that again inside the message to let me know what you want. And he's right about the form letters. They're okay because you kind of understand where people are coming from. But then, like you said, you get a bunch of the same emails saying the same thing, and you're like, are these really people? Or is it some kind of machine generated and you don't know whether it's an honest kind of...
Well, I wasn't talking about those form letters, but there's a I forget what they call it, but it's a very short kind of way to just send a sentence or two, and it goes to all the senators and representatives at once. Same message.
You know, I think that goes to like the secretary out in the hall.
Yeah, I think if you call the secretary,
yeah,
they
she
write
tallies
down,
it.
Write down messages. They can't take messages.
Well, there's a way to
Right.
email it too.
There's a way to email it, but let me tell you, you have to have time because you got to think. We're sitting there, we're reading a bill, we're listening to a bill, and we're looking at email. So you're doing all this at the same time, reading, listening, and looking. And then there's another site where you're talking about where you send that quickie in there. I've been known to go in there and look at it. So, yeah, when you see a bunch of email coming through on a certain subject, you do want to know yes or no. So those can be valuable too. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I don't think anything can really substitute for, if you can, being there at committee, being there in person. I think that is number one. It's why, at Why Liberty and again, we're not here playing, a numbers game. We're playing a policy. We are here to deliver the facts, and the best way to do that is in person. So, and again, I understand Wyoming citizens have jobs. This is my job. I'm very blessed to be here. But if you guys really can get that time, and that's why, again, you don't have to be there during the day. You can even call legislators who are at home, especially here in Laramie County. Your Laramie County delegation goes home at night. So that can really help too. Next question.
2 questions. Does the Legislative Services Office provide educational services to legislators, or is their role limited to making sure that bills are up to legal snuff before they're enacted? If you have a question about water rights, do you have to research that yourself, or can you get the LSO to do that?
Yeah, the LSO, as part of their training, the best training is when you hit the floor and start figuring out how the system works. But yeah, we can have the LSO research bills, and so constituents can ask us about how something's working, and we can have the LSO come up with what the law actually reads, maybe a brief form of that too. I've done that several times, had people that didn't understand what was, like for instance, are you legal driving a pickup and a trailer of a certain weight? And what we found out is there's conflicting laws on it. The federal laws are different than the state laws. But you're safe under the state is kind of what I found out. But things like that you can find out through the legislator who finds out from the LSO.
If I got your question right, you're asking, does a LSO provide education for us?
Right. Are they limited to the legal aspects of things, or can they actually research the subject matter of a bill?
Well, I've had there's an office downstairs in the Capitol where there are researchers. I've gone down there before, just thinking about bills, and I'll ask them to research a specific subject for me. So they'll do that and get the information back to you. I've had that done during the interim committee on towing. I had them give me as much information as they could. And then we do have legal resources there too. And I've gone back during the session on the budget, and there was an issue that I just saw was not right in the statutes, and I went to the lawyers, talked to them, and there was another bill that was pretty controversial, went to the lawyers, and they agreed with me on the bill, and we talked that one down, and both times I was pretty successful in getting that issue talked down because it wasn't the lawyers helped me gather the right information on the bill.
Were the people downstairs related to the Wyoming State Library?
I don't know who they're related to. I just know that they're a resource for us, right, and I'm going to use them when I can.
They are attorneys, and they work for the legislators. LSO, the Legislative Service Office, and they not only craft the bills so that they all read similarly in statute and whatnot, but they do a lot of our research, and they are attorneys that work for the state of Wyoming, for the legislators.
Second question, we have the unpaid $5 lobbyists and the paid $25 lobbyists. When are the badges the same for the two groups? And when they testify in committees, do they have to identify whether they're being paid or not?
No, I never had to do that, and I don't think it matters here for us whether you're being paid more than $500
right.
or being paid nothing.
Are you a citizen activist, or are you somebody doing your job? That would be the distinction.
I don't.
Yeah. You know, it's again, I think the answer is no. You don't really have to. You're just wearing your badge, and what it comes out is in the reporting requirement is when that really comes out, and all of that's available on the Secretary of State's website. You can check that out and see different reports from different lobbyists, and I should emphasize in Wyoming, it's largely an honor system. I don't know that I haven't heard of any, certainly since I've been here, auditing of actual lobbying activity. I think it's the same thing with campaign finance reports, and by and large, I think the lobbying thing is more important because that is money going in, benefiting legislators, as opposed to campaign finance law, which is money that you need to use to get elected, to get your message out and things like that. So I'm very glad that there's not a super oversight of that, because it's a lot of red herring, in my opinion, and it becomes if you think politics is dirty, wait until there's penalties under the law for engaging in it. But I don't know. I think I see where you're going, Bob. And yeah.
I think that the legislators would, if they knew whether someone was a hired gun or not, they'd know how to evaluate what they have to say.
Well, because I was a lobbyist and I sat down in their little Capitol Club, and you get to meet all the lobbyists and you know what they're doing, and some of them will let you know what they're getting paid, and that never mattered to me. It's who they are and what kind of information they have to bring to the table that's important. I never had anybody try to give me anything or try to, hey, I'm working for this big oil company, blah, blah, blah. You don't get that like you do, I think, in the big city. So I think we're pretty safe here.
Yeah, I would only add, you do usually identify, I could sit down and be like, Steve Klein, lobbyist. But I say, no, I sit down and I say Stephen Klein, Wyoming Liberty Group. And that, I think, has a whole different identity from an industry lobbyist. I think that alone suddenly says, wow, it's that nonprofit profit think tank in Cheyenne, versus, wow, it's the giant industry. Hey, be it rail or oil or minerals, et cetera. So I think that kind of is the big sign that it's fairly. I think that's when it kind of comes out in the wash. And again, I think the best thing we can do in politics, and this is what we try and do in our legal work here, is focus on the message. Is to say it really, identity politics, I think, is very toxic. I don't think there should be laws against it, but that's how I think things work out best. And that's why I've honestly loved working in legislative session, because that's largely how it is. So.
We know who's paid most of the time. We know who those people who are full-time working for coal or oil or different groups and whatnot. And you have a pretty good idea who's a volunteer and using their own time. By the end of I'm in my second session, and by the end of my first session, I was pretty much aware which was which, and sometimes it makes a difference, sometimes it doesn't, because you can, well, I won't get into any more of it.
Yes, folks.
It's just for the video, so if you could use it.
Oh, okay. I'm curious, how much does a written letter versus an email or a personal contact, if somebody sits down and actually writes you a letter, how much weight does that carry versus other forms of contacting you?
I like the personal letters, but I'll let you know, just like the email, you get a lot of letters. You get a lot of them. And I kind of like them because it tells me that someone took the time out to sit down, they think it over. Even though I might get the same letter he gets, I like the letters.
I believe they're more effective. I have to confess I haven't responded to all of them, but more than likely you will respond to issues that your own constituents bring in, and if it's in a letter and they're fairly concise with whatever, and you think a short phone call usually isn't a short phone call is the problem, but anyway, I think that's probably more effective, but it's no guarantee.
Okay, and this might be a bit specific, maybe off topic. I was curious, how much response from the public did you folks get as far as responding to SF 104, the Hill bill? I was very curious about that.
I'd say outside of the social issues, that I gleaned a lot of email from that, a lot of it, and most of it was no.
Yeah, it was a controversial one and a difficult one it just was a difficult bill. It was one of those where you had two crummy choices: leave it alone or change and reform. So, and neither of them, either way you did it, it was tough on everybody. But yep, we got a lot.
Well, Representative, I wrote you several letters asking for information, and I didn't receive any response. And I understand. I know you've got so many letters, you probably can't respond to all of them, but could you, I would like to understand, maybe there's something going on that those of us in the general public didn't hear about or understand, because I read the newspapers, I try to stay informed as best I can, but I've not heard what all was going on behind the scenes. If you could enlighten me, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you both.
Yeah. And again, I'd like, if you guys want to engage, we're going to be wrapping up here in just a few minutes, but I do want to keep this to that broad, big topic instead of talking specific policy. But thank you for your question. I don't want to, it's an important topic, certainly.
When you were talking about the number of bills that go through session, and you said 400, is there a limit to how many bills are going to be in a certain session? Do they have to be in at a certain time for you to, go over them in that time frame and things like that? Is there a limit each session?
There's a limit on time. The emphasis is on time. You can see on the calendar that's again on the Wyoming Legislature website. They will have a calendar that first reading in first house has to happen by this day. Second reading in the first house has to happen. It goes all the way to the end. And that's where there are, in respective houses, some very important, powerful people, namely the majority leaders in both houses, get to select what bills come to the floor. You could get a bill through right at the beginning of session even, and there it might languish on the docket at the very bottom, never getting first reading in the House, and then suddenly it is no more. So even though and that can even happen in the second house, you can get it through the House with a 59-0 vote, not to name any specifics, and then it could get through committee of the other House, and then with plenty of time left, it will just not get heard. I mean, inevitably, I think some bills will die at the end of session just because you really did run out of time, but the majority leaders on either side have a lot of control over what stays there. So that's a very important point, but it is largely based on time. In a legislative session, a general session, 40 days, which is not last year and next year, every other year, a legislator can sponsor as many bills as he or she wants, and they will all be introduced. I think that's the case. It's when the budget session, when you are limited to the number you can sponsor, I believe to 7 bills, and there is a limit. 5 in the Senate. Thank you. And then so there's that limit, and then there's also a threshold for introduction. You have to have is a majority vote 2/3. You have to have a 2/3 vote in the House to say this bill is worth hearing. So during a budget session, that is a really high threshold, and that tends to. I like it because ideally I'd love to go back to the days when the budget session was the budget session, and that's it. Those days were gone long before I got here. So those are the kind of limits there. I think one more question.
Time for one last question.
Okay, I know you both spoke to brief bullet points and notes. Is it helpful at all to you if people would send you something that would show specific edits to a bill that you're considering that they would like, as opposed to a vote yes or vote no? Just suggested changes?
Probably. It helps with the education process and where the weaknesses or strengths or whatever are in the bill. I think that's probably helpful. I don't know as it's just yes or no. There has to be an explanation. Yes or no won't work.
I wouldn't mind having that happen, but I would want to sit with you beforehand and look over what you proposed and see how it fit in the bill and see if it made sense and so on and so forth before I proposed it. But yeah, that wouldn't bother us because that's what we're here for.
Thank you very much for coming out this evening, and I really encourage those of you to get in. Those who have not been involved, get involved. Those of you who have been involved, stay involved. Especially, Wyoming Liberty Group, we now have a lot of policy experts here. I believe we have about a dozen people in the office now. So it's really an exciting time here, and it's really I really get kind of geeked during session because I'll admit I get quite a few emails, but not nearly as many as I'd like. And it's really fun to sit down, and we are an educational organization. I'm not just here to get laws passed and get good policy implemented. I want you guys to know about it, and I want to know about what's on your minds as well, even though I'm not an elected official. So by all means, either stop by, and this can happen before session 2, where there's going to be bills will start showing up on LSO's website. There are already a lot of drafts of committee bills up there, so you can get up to speed on that. So please do. That's what we are. We are a resource. We are really here for you. So please do a round of applause for Lynn and John here.